Let me start with something that's serious, obviously, and I just finished visiting with the team about Josh Reynolds last week was involved in a very serious incident, shooting. I'm kind of like you, where I've got the initial details, and he's fortunate. And so currently the league, and then obviously the local authorities are handling that. I've had a chance to talk with him. He was pretty shaken up, and I'll leave it at that. All right, so any questions as we head into this game?
Sean, I know there's not a lot you can say, but when you have a guy who goes through something traumatic like that, it's not as simple as...
No, you're right.
How do you deal with that?
Well, look, today we've got counseling. We got so many resources that they go into play, all of it.
Do you have a separate conversation or a bigger conversation that all the dudes in New Orleans, them getting targets and just kind of being aware of what they're getting into?
Yeah, look, I don't know the specifics. I mean, this city's different than, but yeah.
Sean, what have you seen from Devin Key over the last 7 days, both on season days?
Well, I would say, man, he made some hay in camp and in the preseason games where we felt like this guy, has got good instincts, and he played well. And so, if he has to go, he'll be ready. He's gotten a lot of the work. So, we're fortunate we've seen his progress, and here we go. If that happens, next man up.
You talked a little bit about the progress made against the Raiders and the Saints over the last few weeks. What would progress look like to you offensively?
Well, listen, there's two things that go on in this type of game, and progress is getting to our fifth win. And so that can come in different ways, but the focus is really on our preparation internally relative to, and then obviously externally relative to what they do scheme-wise. But there's a lot of moving parts. As I usually, in my office, I've got a giant depth chart so I don't have to put my readers on. And man, there's moving pieces here with their depth chart. And then there's some knowns, if you will. And it just is what it is. And so, but I would say more than ever, the focus is on the details within what we're doing, and then understanding, hey, who are these players? At the beginning of the week, we do a pro report on Mondays, always 5 o'clock defense, 5:30 offense, and then 6 o'clock special teams, and we hear a report on every one of these opponent players, strengths, weaknesses, and that's important as we begin to build the plan.
How vital, Sean, has it been to your defense, having a guy like Nick Benito on one side and Jonathan Cooper on the other, providing that pressure from each side?
I think in our league, those edge players are super important, especially if you're in an odd front. In other words, man, the challenge at Pittsburgh was the two of them, and so having guys that are having production, that's important. It's hard to play that. It's hard to play this defense, if you don't. So, I think it's important.
You've talked about each game, there's a different approach of how you win this game, but to have the ability you can run it 1 week, or in Tampa came out throwing, to be able to win in different ways, I guess, how valuable is that as a coach?
I think, look, I learned that from Bill a long time ago. Just his old coach told him there's a way to win every one of these games. You just have to figure out how. Now think about that for a second. That's every game. And so you lose sleep sometimes when you lose a game. Maybe I'll go back to New England. We didn't do a good enough job coaching. I mean, in other words, what's the way to win that game? And so that can vary based on your opponent. We played the Chiefs one year. They had the number one offense in football. And this was 2000, I think it's 3 or 4. But they were explosive. And so Tuesday morning we had a staff meeting, and we're all waiting for Bill to talk about how time of possession, run the ball. And he came in and he used this analogy. I think it was UNLV in Indiana in basketball, and that was the Running Rebels, and he did the exact opposite. He said, we're gonna outscore them. Now, and we all kind of looked at him like we thought, but I think Knight did that in one game. And so you have a way you have a way in your mind how you think you have to win the game, and then you have to midstream adjust if sometimes that way doesn't necessarily unfold the way you're thinking.
I was going to say, sometimes you don't know what the way is until midway through the second quarter.
Look, yeah, sometimes me as a play caller, I'm paying attention to what we're doing defensively. Like that impacts, and so he was always leery of the offensive coordinator, the defensive coordinator, just calling their games and not understanding how it all ties together. But look, that's just that experience that I've had with him. And there's a way to win each one of these, but we have to understand how we think. And so we do our best to do that.
When you're making in-game adjustments,
yeah,
how do you kind of balance patience with what you believe in and what your philosophy is with? Okay.
I think it's important when you look at the picture. You ran a play, and let's just say it gained a yard. I'm yelling at Streif. It was a running play, but then we look at the pictures, and it's like, come back to it. This is a better play. We'll get. So it's you got to be a good listener. I like when coaches have conviction. Because I'm buying. They're selling a scheme or route or in these meetings. And so I think a strong opinion means something, and so, but that happens in games sometimes. There'll be something early on, and then I might be like, and then Zach will walk over and say, "Hey, get back to that. That's going to be fine. Don't let that one. That's important."
Is it the case where the longer you're with the roster or the quarterback or whoever, you get a better sense more quickly?
The longer you're with the team, yeah.
Coach, kind of along these lines, in week 3 against Tampa, when you guys won the toss, you decided to receive, to be aggressive. You said after the game. You haven't done that every game. How do you decide what game?
Well, we were doing it last week. I just said in the meetings to our guys, we do an analytical report. I think Dennis is deferred, 17 of 18, and I knew we were going to take it. And then so there was a 99% chance we were going to have the ball. And I told Lutz we're not going to have to worry about any wind or any, in other words, I think it just depends on your team and their team. And so it's not just, hey, there's a reason behind it too.
Going back to listening to the guys with conviction, how much harder is it for newer coaches? Like, you've been with Zach forever, you've been with Joe forever, and Joe told us.
Well, look, I was my first year. I'd never met Bill, and met him on an airplane to Dallas, and he'd start screaming, and then it would be a follow-up. Are you sure? With a swear word in there. I like it. This is it. Yeah, he wanted a strong opinion, and that meant something. It wasn't always necessarily successful, but yeah. And same thing happens in the off season when we scout. You want strong convictions on whether we like players or we don't like players. I don't want to circle the bases and then still end up with I don't know where we're at here. We just hit on all his positives and negatives. I want to hear, do you love him? Do you like him? Or I need to do more work on him. And so these guys learn that quick. I'll just shout at them like, hey, tell me you like it or not. I think so. I don't think it's just the experienced coach like that's been with me. I've never had Streif as a coach, just had him as a player. So anyway.
How valuable has Skitty been this season to Bo Nix, both in the quarterback room during the week and on the sidelines during the game?
I think very. I think there's a real good demeanor, calming demeanor, experience. So many of these things that may be new. Again, you're leaving a college offense and you're tweaking, but so many of these things that Jared's seen, and like whether it's a read progression, footwork, and then of course, obviously, that room I like. Zach and Davis is doing a great job in there. I mean, there's enough snaps in there, and then there's compatibility in there, and that's just as important.
Sean, with that experience and the trade deadline looming in a couple of weeks, specifically the quarterbacks, because you know who you start.
Yeah.
How often do you get calls about your back?
George would be the better one to ask, but we'll get teasers. You know, a team a couple weeks ago, hey, not even, and then you don't, you know, when there's a call that is somewhat substantial, it's still like the beginning process. Hey, this is what we might, you know, and then we're 2 weeks away, and George and I'll talk about it each day, but we're focused on this right now. I understand it, and yet it's pretty normal. I mean, it's look, there's a group of teams shopping a certain list of players, and some teams are easier to do a deal with maybe than others, but right now I like where we're at with this group.